Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost an Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And now, here are your hosts, Scott and Jesse from CompassKnox.com.
Hello and welcome again to Compass Points, the weekly podcast where we talk about Knoxville government, politics, education, business, really whatever gets our attention. My name is Jesse Mayshark. I am co-founder and co-publisher of Compass, which you can find at CompassKnox.com. Joined, as always, by Scott Barker, also co-publisher and co-founder of Compass. How are you doing today, Scott?
Oh, I'm just peachy today. It's the temperature's going to be dropping down to 90, so
getting temperate.
Yeah, so I'm almost put on a flannel shirt.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a scorcher of a summer, huh?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I guess we'll have to wait for the weather data crunchers to come back and tell us where it ranks, but experientially, I will say it has felt like a pretty steamy summer. All right, well, we have some things to talk about. An interesting allocation of money coming through the county, going to local nonprofits from national settlements in opioid lawsuits. Talk about that a little bit. We have an update, not a good one, on the status of the Gay Street Bridge, our historic, photogenic, and currently closed gateway from South Knoxville into downtown. We wrote this week about a new program to distribute period products to Knox County students, which is interesting in and of itself, and also sort of in light of some conversations going on at the state and national levels, including in the presidential race. And Scott thought we would start out by following up on something that we talked about last week, which is the proposal that Knoxville City Council has approved to put on the November ballot. It's a referendum asking voters to approve a change in how we elect city council members. And last week, we just kind of talked about the mechanics of that and the discussion on city council. This week, you wrote about some of the feedback that council has received from different members of the community, and their either concerns or reasons to support that change. So what is the range of conversation about this referendum?
Yeah, what I did was I went back and looked at the people who came to the two city council meetings where this was discussed in depth, and went back and reviewed the comments that were made, and they really kind of fell into kind of three categories. The biggest concern is that by moving to an all at-large voting system, which is going to be the question that's going to be on the ballot, do you want to do that?
Right, this would be turning all 9 city council seats into at-large seats. Right now we have 6 district seats and 3 at-large members.
Right, and the 6 seats that are currently district seats, well, this is where it gets really complicated. This is why these articles, end up being really long, because you got to explain this. Those 6 district seats will become regional seats, and there'll be at-large voting in both the primary and general election, but the candidates have to be from that region. So, for instance, what is now the 1st district, whoever runs for the 1st district seat would have to be from South Knoxville, or conceivably UT, but they would have to be from South Knoxville, but they would be elected at large anyway. And if that gets rejected at the ballot in the election, if the referendum fails, we'll go to an all district only voting system for those districts.
Right. We would still have the 3 existing at-large seats.
Right.
But the existing district seats would only be elected within the districts.
Right. Current or up until this year, or up until last year, the district voters would pick their 2 top choices, and then they would go on to the general election where they would there would be a citywide vote. Now, if this proposal gets rejected at the ballot box, it would go to the districts would vote in the primary and then again in the general election, and you would no longer vote for district reps outside of your own district.
Which I think it's always important to point out, because sometimes like people can get confused thinking about this. This is the way that we already elect county commission members. It's the way we already elect school board members, district representatives to those bodies live in those districts and are elected only by people who live in those districts. And this is also that's also the way that most, not all, but most cities in the state also have district only voting. And so really, like, if this proposal fails in November, the system that we're going to end up with will be what you could reasonably call the normal way that most places elect district representatives to local bodies.
Yeah, and that was a point that was made by several people who spoke in opposition to the proposal. They said, hey, I don't vote for anybody else's state representative. I don't vote for anybody else's senator. That's, we don't vote for, the governor of Kentucky, whatever it is you want to talk about. So anyway, the one of the interesting things that came out of this was that the kind of some of the origin story for the change in state law that's bringing this on, and because it was brought forward by State Representative Elaine Davis, who part of her district is in the city of Knoxville. Most of it is not. It's outside the city in South Knox County. But Nick Cipro, who ran for city council in 2021 in the 3rd district and lost, but he got up and spoke and talked about a meeting of several neighborhood organizations in the Northwest Knoxville, which is where the 3rd district is, and they were upset because one of the things is in 2017, Seema Singh ran for that seat. She came in second, a distant second in the primary, which was the district only primary, but citywide she won. Now she won again in the primary this time. In the general election, she got fewer votes in the district than Cipro did, but citywide she got more, and so she was reelected. And they were apparently, these neighborhood groups were upset. They approached Davis, and one of the kind of the driving forces behind that is that the 3rd district is probably the most conservative district in the city, and Seema Singh, who represents them, is one of the most progressive members of city council. So there was some complaints about that. So I guess the idea behind this is if you do only district only voting, they've got a better shot of getting a more conservative representative from the 3rd district. that's kind of interesting because when it was debated in the state legislature, the emphasis was on Davis and others who supported it. The emphasis was on ensuring that minority representation continued in the city. It was all about minority representation, which wasn't the concern at the beginning, but they did that, and they got support from a lot of Democrats, and it passed on a bipartisan basis, and the concerns about minority representation was kind of the biggest issue for people who came to speak to council in the last 2 weeks. Several of the people who spoke, Deirdre Harper, who ran for city council a couple of years ago, and Nzinga Amani, who also ran for city council before, were two very outspoken people about how the at-large voting in general, all across the country, tends to restrict or reduce minority representation, especially in areas with white majorities, like Knoxville. And we're concerned that would happen again here, especially if we do all at large. Now, one thing is, under the city's previous setup, that hadn't been a real problem in the 6th district, which is the only minority district we have. The citywide vote has gone in favor of the person who finished first in the district primary every year since 1997.
And it has, even in the years prior to that, where there were a few times where the person who won the 6th district primary lost in the general, it was still an African American representative. So the system, the citywide voting system that we have right now, to date anyway, has not produced, like, there's the potential there to have a negative effect on racial diversity, but that hasn't happened. And in fact, as several people who support this proposal said, council right now under the current system is actually the most diverse that it's ever been in terms of race and gender.
Oh yeah, in fact, 1/3 of council is made up of women of color, and it's so basically 67% of council is white, and in the city it's about 73%.
Right. So actually pretty close.
Yeah. So it's really close to mirroring the racial mix in the city. Anyway, but that was not a universal opinion. To the Reverend Harold Middlebrook, who is a civil rights icon. He was with Martin Luther King Jr. in Memphis when he was assassinated, and he is a highly esteemed or respected in the African American community. It falls way short of the regard he's held in. But Middlebrook said that he used to have concerns about that very, very thing about minority representation, but that in recent years, and he pointed to the current makeup on council, and said that he had seen hearts change, and that the city as a whole, looks beyond that and votes and will vote for African Americans and people of color. And the Reverend Sam Brown, who's the head of the NAACP, essentially said the same thing. So it was. So there's there's debate within the African American community about that, and of course in the city at large. So, but that was the one issue that got the most attention. There were a couple of people who talked about how it would be. They thought it might be detrimental to all neighborhoods because it would kind of diminish each and every neighborhood in the city because they would no longer really have a possibility that they wouldn't have their choice of person running for office. So there was also a lot of talk, and this is on the other side, the side that is in favor of going to an all-at-large system, and their big concern is accountability. And under the current or the system we've used up till now, every voter could vote for all 9 seats on city council. Theoretically, you could go to any of the council members and get them to help you do whatever it is you need help doing, or whatever so if you didn't get along with your district rep, you could go to an at-large member or even another district rep because you vote for them, and they say that they're very responsive to people no matter where they live in the city, and that would be gone now. Other than the at-large representatives, if you're living in the 4th district and you go to the 5th district rep to get some assistance, they'll say, talk to your rep. Don't come to me. I got my own constituents to worry about. That's kind of the fear there, and several prominent people were saying that accountability measure is what is really needed to make the council members more responsive to the city as a whole. I'm talking about former city council member Carly Malone, former election administrator Clifford Rogers, and Joyce Feld, who is a prominent civic leader. Mm-hmm. And so they all and there was one interesting person was somebody I didn't really know, a woman named Kaylee McVetti, and she got up and was talking about how she had lived in other cities and moved here and was just astounded at the responsiveness of city government of council members, and that you don't encounter that in other places. That's one of the things that makes Knoxville unique. But, so all these different perspectives came out during the discussion. The one complaint that was registered from Bentley Marlowe, who ran for city council last time, was that it was rushed, and just been really in the last month that they've talked about doing this, and it's going to change. Whatever they do, it's going to change the election moving forward,
including starting next year.
Yeah, starting next year, and but on the flip side, council members had pointed out that and a couple of the speakers who were supportive of this proposal did too, that residents have until November. The election's November 5th. That's when it's going to be on the ballot. Voters have until then to find out about it and weigh the pros and cons, and because they're the ones who are actually going to decide.
Right. Well, and we will certainly be talking more about it to continue to inform people, and I guess we'll see if I wonder if anybody has thought about doing. We have debates or forums for candidates who are running for office. It might be interesting, and I'm just throwing this out there right now, but it might be interesting to have some sort of event where people could kind of debate or hash this out in a setting outside a city council meeting. Maybe that's something we can talk about. We can talk about doing that. All right.
But yeah, someplace where people can go, they can see they're only going to be, because it's a referendum. referendum questions have to be worded a yes or no. So only one of the options will be on the ballot, and that's the all at large option. That will be on the ballot. But then you could also have a display or whatever it takes to show that if that is rejected, what.
Right,
the
because you are functionally choosing between two different systems, but like you say, only one of them is going to be on the ballot. The other one is the one that happens if nothing changes.
Yeah, the one thing that's certain is the election system is going to have to change.
Yeah,
I mean that is state law now. It's changing. It's all a matter of how the citizens of Knoxville want to change.
Right. There's 5 city council seats on the ballot in 2025, and those are going to be elected differently than they have been in the past. We just don't know how yet.
Well, actually, there will be another referendum question on the ballot about that. Actually, there may end up being 6 if it passes.
Right.
Because there's one district seat is elected on a different cycle, the 5th district, and there will be another amendment on the referendum on the ballot to change its election cycle to line up with the other district seats. So,
right,
and if it passes, then there will be 6.
All right. Well, we'll continue to talk about that heading into the when voting actually starts, which at this point is not too far off. We're just about 2 months out from early voting starting in for that November election.
Yeah.
Okay, speaking of the November election, one of the issues that has become a little bit of a talking point in the presidential race has to do with providing period products in public schools, talking about sanitary pads or tampons. And this has become an issue at the national level because Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, who, as we all know, is Vice President Kamala Harris's running mate for vice president in the election this year. He signed a bill earlier this year that was passed by the Minnesota legislature that requires schools in Minnesota to provide free period products to menstruating students in grades 4 through 12 in all Minnesota schools. That's what the law says. It has been presented in some somewhat distorted ways, and you've had people on the right and some conservative commentators trying to take shots at Walz and calling him quote-unquote tampon Tim, and the spin that they're giving it is that he's forcing tampons to be available in boys' bathrooms, and that's not actually what the law says. Again, the law just says they should be available to all menstruating students. It doesn't even spell out how schools have to do this. It's just providing the resources to do it and saying that they need to do it. It makes Minnesota one of 28 states in the country. So a majority of states in the country do provide period products in one way or another to students in public schools in the same way that they provide other sanitary materials in restrooms. But Minnesota is also one of the majority of American states that allows transgender students to use the bathroom that aligns with their gender identity. Again, more than 30 states in the United States allow this. It's not a big deal. I realize in Tennessee and in some of our surrounding states, it's a thing people like to get all worked up about, but in the majority of the country, it's just normal life. And so given that, it is possible that some Minnesota schools that know they have transgender students and, transgender male students who present and identify as male, but who maybe haven't aren't taking hormone blockers and so forth, can still menstruate. And so some of those schools, it's true, may elect to put some of those products in all of their bathrooms, not only in their girls' bathrooms. And so that seems to be the thing that some of these, conservative comment. The way this is being framed is, Tim Walz is forcing boys to have tampons in their bathrooms. It's like just not actually what's happening, but that's kind of what's propelled it. But what was interesting to me about this conversation at the national level is here in Knox County, starting this school year, driven by a student initiative. The school system is working to make period products available. They're starting at the high school level. The recommendation from the students who are working on it was that, it would be great to have it all the way down to middle schools, but they're starting with high schools. And that in a girl's bathroom, at least one girl's bathroom in each of the high schools, they will just have period products available. And this is, for one thing, not actually a new thing. 3 Knox County schools already had this, Farragut, West, and Career Magnet Academy. And all Knox County schools have sanitary pads available in one way or another to students, whether it's in the nurse's office or the clinic and so forth. The students, and it was 3 female students who did this study and brought it to the school board and made this proposal, said that the problem with only having it in the clinics is that a lot of students don't know they're available, or, it's embarrassing for students to have to walk in and say, hey, can I have a sanitary pad? And that it's much more user-friendly to students who need them to just have them easily available in the bathrooms. And this wasn't controversial. They presented this at the July board meeting. The 3 students were warmly received by school board members, Democrats, Republicans, etc. And the administration is moving forward with this as kind of a pilot program. They're going to track how it goes this year and kind of see what the demand is and see if there's, what the response from students is and so forth, and maybe look to broaden it in the future. So that is going on. And then the other interesting thing is one of our own state representatives, you just mentioned, Elaine Davis, who's a Republican, conservative Republican representative from the 18th District. She co-sponsored a bill this year with Democratic State Senator Ramesh Akbari from Memphis that would have required schools and would have provided funding, state funding, for schools across the state to provide period products for free in girls' bathrooms in all high schools. And I talked to Davis about it, and she, like the students who presented to the school board, and honestly, like Governor Tim Walz when he has talked about it, they all just say, well, look, this is a pretty straightforward thing. It may be something that for various societal and cultural reasons has historically been uncomfortable for people to talk about or embarrassing for girls to talk about, but this is just, part of human biology, and it's a regular need that half the population of fertile age has, and there's no reason it shouldn't be accommodated the same way we accommodate. Like Davis said that she was actually partly inspired to support this bill by a program the state started this year to provide free diapers to low-income families. And kind of her argument was, well, if we're providing diapers and we provide toilet paper in public restrooms, this is just another basic sanitary need that we should be taking care of. And she said she was supportive of the program Knox County is implementing, and she hopes to work more. The bill that she supported got waylaid at the state level, not for ideological reasons, but for the reason lots of things get waylaid at the state level, which is financial ones. She and Akbari were proposing to take 20% of the sales tax that's generated by sales of menstrual products and use that to pay for this. And basically the state finance people were like, well, we're already using that money for other things. So, it's going to have a negative fiscal impact. So she said they would continue working on that at the state level and kind of see what they could do. But in Knox County is already buying these supplies. They're already stocking them in their schools. Really, what their program is doing is just, like apparently the Minnesota program, just moving them into a place where they're more accessible and user-friendly to people. But I think it's just an interesting conversation for people to be having, because I think it is true. It's been something that hasn't been publicly talked about a whole lot. That may be partly a function of the fact that so many of our legislative bodies for so long have been dominated by men. And now, at least at the local level, that has shifted some. And also that, I think young women, certainly the young women who came and talked to the school board about it, don't feel those levels of shame or embarrassment or whatever in talking about it.
When I was a teenager way back in the day, nobody talked about it.
Yeah.
It just wasn't discussed. Now, we knew what they were. I mean, I had a sister and a mom, and I knew what tampons were and pads and all, but you didn't talk about it.
Yeah. It was girl stuff.
It just wasn't done. Right. And some girls would be, quite embarrassed about, things, would happen suddenly, and they would be very embarrassed. And, this is a way, at least, to me, growing up that way, the best thing about the bill and these issues and all is that we are talking about things like this, because, like you said, it's just biology.
Right. It's just what our bodies do, or what some people's bodies do. And, I do think that the way it's being used in sort of the presidential campaign, this implication that, and yes, it is tied into sort of the transgender panic that's going on. But beyond that, there's sort of like the sense that it's like kind of, this kind of thing of calling walls tampon Tim. It's like, ooh, it's icky to talk about, which does seem weird. And a conversation that I've had with people is this kind of horror that in some cases, like in some Minnesota schools, maybe there will be sanitary pads in a boys' bathroom. It's like, well, what do you think is like, what's going to happen that's bad because of that? Because like you say, I, like many American males, I grew up in a family that had females in it. I guess that's not true of everybody, I know, but most people do grow up in families and households that have female people in them. And like every bathroom that I grew up in as a kid had period products in them, in the same way that they had toilet paper and Kleenex and toothpaste and whatever. It was just so there is some sort of like psychological thing that's being triggered there for some people just with the mentioning of the issue, I think. And like you say, that seems to be ameliorating a little bit. And so it's just interesting to see the kind of practical, pragmatic discussion of it here at the local level, and even with Davis pushing her bill at the state level, and then the way it's kind of being invoked by like Fox News pundits and so forth. There's a disconnect, I guess.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, let's talk about, speaking of disconnects. I can literally segue anything into anything. Speaking of disconnects, that's one of the concerns about the Gay Street Bridge.
Yes, it is.
It has been closed now for several weeks, as we know, but the city released an update on its status this past week, Scott, and that update was not great.
It was bad. It was bad. What happened is on the 25th of June, the Tennessee Department of Transportation did their annual inspection of the Gay Street Bridge. Now, most bridges get inspected once every 24 months. The Gay Street Bridge has been inspected annually, instead, because it's old, and and they found a section of one of the arches underneath one of the truss arches was kind of the steel was kind of warped in it. And that was very concerning to them, and so they shut down the bridge, and or told the city to. The city actually owns the bridge, but then they were going to conduct more inspections. They brought in an engineering firm, Michael Baker International, to conduct a further assessment. And they found lots of other stuff that was wrong too. Some stuff like you would expect, kind of like a little bit of rust, a little bit of corrosion. But they also found steel pieces that weren't aligned properly with each other, and so that was a big concern as well. Basically, the state has determined that it's that the bridge is in poor condition. That one arch that was where the steel was kind of warped a little bit is in critical condition. So I'm not an engineer, but it sounds really bad. And so they recommended the city keep it closed. And they're keeping it closed to pedestrians as well. I mean, it's closed to everybody, every mode of transportation right now. And the city is they're actually in talks with Michael Baker International to keep them on, since they're already familiar with the bridge and have been doing this assessment of it, to do further assessments so they can get an idea of the scope of the work that they would need to do to repair it. And so they don't know how much it would cost at this point, obviously. They don't know how long it would take. But it's something that, 20 years ago, they've wrapped up a 3-year complete renovation of the bridge. That it was closed for that, from 2001 to 2004 it was closed, and that cost over $15 million and took 3 years. So now this wouldn't, it's what we know now, this wouldn't entail everything that they had to do then. So, but we've had inflation too. So, right now the city plans to do that, to rebuild it through. They're in talks with TDOT to possibly get state funding when they find out how much it's going to cost. Because the last time this happened, they used city funds, state funds, and federal funds. So they're going to be trying to figure out how to pay for this damage. In the meantime, traffic is basically in the downtown area to South Knoxville. That bridge traffic is going to be going to the Henley Bridge or to the South Knoxville Bridge. It could, at least I think initially it's had a little bit of an impact on the businesses along Sevier Avenue, which they were that's been one of the retail / restaurant success stories in Knoxville recently. It was there was almost there was nothing like that. There weren't restaurants or anything like that along that stretch of Sevier Avenue 15 years ago. Now it's grown. It's a vibrant area, and so. But if people want to get there, they're going to have to go the South Knoxville Bridge is the most convenient way to get there. But then they can also use the Henley Bridge.
Right, and I do think that the easy connectivity that the Gay Street Bridge provides to that stretch of South Knoxville, I mean, it would probably be hard to quantify how much that's contributed to the redevelopment down there, but I think substantially, because it's been easy to kind of see and think of Sevier Avenue as almost like an extension of downtown. As downtown is redeveloped, it's just kind of moved across that bridge there, going across either the Henley Bridge, which of course you have to deal with Henley Street, and it feels Chapman Highway. It feels like a more intensive thing to have to do, or to go to the South Knoxville Bridge, which, depending on where you're coming from, is not necessarily the most convenient place to get to.
It's not very it's not an intuitive roadway.
You kind of have to go down, around, out of your way and then come back.
Right. Yeah. It also leaves just the one option for pedestrians, because you can't take the South Knoxville. I mean, I've seen people walking on it, but I don't think you're supposed
there is no official pedestrian
you're supposed
access
to walk that way.
Right.
Yeah. So I had a quick question on the topic. Is there, if you know the answer, has there been traffic studies recently of how much traffic the Gay Street Bridge was?
7,000 vehicles a day.
Compared to its neighboring bridges?
I didn't.
Okay.
I don't know.
Because that was
Henley is a lot busier than that.
Right. And I would think the South Knox one is probably at least comparable, if not a little bit more, would be my guess.
Maybe.
But, because that was my take on it. Like, for me, but that's me coming from a different side of town, because I don't live in downtown proper. But I'd say for me, I would always take the South Knox Bridge if I'm going down to Sevier Avenue anyway. But I'm curious how this.
If you're coming off the interstate, the South Knox Bridge is a pretty easy way to go. If you're coming from somewhere else in the city, it can be a little bit of a hassle to get over there. But I guess we'll see what happens there. I mean, the Gay Street Bridge, I feel like it does have a functional purpose, obviously, as we've been talking about. But it also has it is an icon, an architectural icon, I feel like, of the city. It's a beautiful old bridge.
It's on the National Register of Historic Places.
Yeah, so. And I feel like it contributes a lot to Knoxville's engagement with the river and with, South Knoxville. So this could be one of those situations where if it ends up being really expensive, there's going to have to be decisions made about what's the actual value of it. And I feel like not all of its values are strictly practical. It has some intangible values too. And weighing those can be tricky in public policy.
One of the things that's come out of this is there have been already rumblings of, if it can't fix it, for vehicular traffic, turn it into a pedestrian bridge, which Chattanooga did with their Walnut Street Bridge, which is a much longer bridge than the Gay Street Bridge, and that's the city's not considering that, but they also don't know how much it's going to cost to fix it. So, plus, they've got another pedestrian bridge they want to build across the
right,
river.
and turning the Gay Street Bridge into a pedestrian bridge would not serve the needs that the other one farther down the river that's being talked about would, which is to connect that area over to the University of Tennessee campus.
Yeah.
So, I guess we will see what happens.
Yeah, and one other thing about this that has come up is kind of what happened. I mean, this is some pretty extensive damage, I guess you would call it, or deterioration, however you want to phrase it. But it was just inspected last year, and every year before, and it had they had not found problems of that magnitude, these particular problems, or problems of that magnitude in the previous inspections. So I asked Tom Claybo, who's the engineering director for the city, what causes this? And he said, well, we don't know the cause. Mm-hmm. It's that's one thing we don't know. All we do know is that it has passed inspections up until this past year. So.
Right. Well, I mean, I guess it's good that it got caught before something terrible happened, like we've seen in other cities where bridges actually, where the way that you find out that a bridge is about to fail is that it actually fails.
Yes.
Definitely don't want that to happen. All right, another thing we wrote about this week, kind of interesting, coming to County Commission this month for approval is a set of contracts that will distribute money to local nonprofits that comes from the national opioid settlements. And people may be aware that there have been, for some years now, there's been multiple streams of litigation filed by state and local governments, also by individuals, families, a whole universe of people against various corporations, pharmaceutical companies, pharmacies, grocery stores, basically anybody who was involved in the mass distribution and overprescription and really, I think, reckless might be the word to use, infusion of prescription opioids into the United States population, certainly into the population of East Tennessee and Southern Appalachia, which is one of the hardest hit areas of the country by the ongoing opioid crisis. And of course, that phase of the opioid crisis that was really driven by prescription drugs has somewhat subsided in the past 10 years. And a lot of the ongoing problems with addiction and overdose deaths these days are from black market drugs, from heroin, and especially from opioid analogs like fentanyl that are not being distributed by doctors but are coming through various black market means. But the landscape was created, the table was kind of set for all of this, I think everybody agrees, by the mass production and prescription and distribution of drugs like OxyContin that came through pharmaceutical companies, were prescribed by doctors, were distributed by pharmacies. And so these lawsuits have basically alleged that all of those parties bear some responsibility, including fiscal responsibility, for creating this crisis. And a lot of those companies have reached settlements at the national level. And those settlements, this is all, the litigation is very complex. The settlements are very complex. The way that those monies are being distributed down to the states and then through the states to local entities, also very complex. But here in Knox County, I talked to Jenny Holden, who's the county's director of grants and community development, who's kind of overseeing this at the county level. She said they're anticipating from the current, there are still some major cases out there awaiting settlement, but from the ones that have been settled to date, which include parties like Kroger and Food City, and then in the more recent round, CVS, Walgreens, Walmart through the Walmart pharmacies, and some of the drug makers as well. Knox County is expecting to receive about $12 million over the next 3 years. That money is then being distributed. The county is using some of that money itself for some of its own programming, but is also then distributing it to local agencies and entities engaged in substance abuse treatment and prevention. And so we have on the county commission agenda this month about $2.3 million that's being distributed through 21 different contracts to 18 different local agencies. And the county went through a pretty intensive process to they came up with 6 priorities that they wanted to try to address, including prevention, including treatment, including sort of different levels of treatment for people kind of depending on where they are in their ongoing struggles. And so we talked to a couple of the major agencies that are receiving those, the McNabb Center, which of course is probably the largest, certainly one of the largest social service agencies in the county. They provide just a range of services, and they already have a lot of existing contracts of various kinds with our local governments. They are receiving 2 different contracts through this for a combined total of about $660,000. They're going to be using their money for a couple of specific things. One is to really significantly increase the number of beds at their in-treatment Centerpoint facility. They're going to be increasing that from 46 to 72 beds. So that's a pretty good, increase, about a 50% increase in their capacity there. Also using part of that to form these really kind of intensive teams that will be specifically assigned to help people who have been through treatment already and have had, continued struggles, and really kind of looking at, how do you kind of surround those people with a network of support, a case manager, a medical person, somebody who is engaged with them at kind of like the social service level, trying to work intensively, and that'll serve about 200 people on an ongoing basis. Because as we know, treatment for any addiction, opioid addiction in particular, people often have to, it's not like a one and done thing. You don't just go to like a weekend in treatment facility. You can kind of get detoxed in a short period of time, but actually maintaining that recovery is a great challenge. And often people have to go through these programs multiple times. And so this particular program with McNabb is trying to provide really intensive services to people who have maybe struggled to maintain recovery, but are motivated to, but need the support to do it. Also talked to the Office of Housing Stability, which we've talked about before. It's a joint city-county office that was formed last year. And of course, they deal with issues of homelessness in particular. And there is a lot of overlap between people who are homeless and people who are struggling with substance issues. One point that Aaron Reed with that office often makes is that that's not like a one-way street. Like there's often an assumption that people become homeless because they have substance issues. That can be true, but it is also just as true that people become homeless. I mean, the primary causes of homelessness are economic, and that it's true that people become homeless for a range of reasons, but then are more prone to develop substance issues for the range of reasons that go along with all the things that you deal with when you're homeless. But regardless, it's an issue that they know they need to focus on, the Office of Housing Stability. And so they're getting $250,000 out of this that will be used over 3 years to pay for basically a full-time position that's going to be assigned to try to deal with substance issues in the homeless population in a variety of ways. Some of that is coordinating with other local providers. Some of it is ensuring that voices of people with lived experience, people who are homeless or have been homeless with substance issues, are part of the conversation about these issues and about how to best, serve the needs of that population. And then there's a whole bunch of other organizations, the Metro Drug Coalition, CAC, Children's Hospital, lots of local nonprofit agencies have various programs dealing with prevention or treatment for people with substance issues. And so, and you can see that whole list. We link to it in our coverage. You can also find it on County Commission's agenda. So I imagine that County Commission will, none of this money gets distributed until Commission approves it. There's no reason to think there will be any challenge with that. But Scott, I think it's, an interesting thing to see. We've talked a lot about the specific impact of the opioid crisis on East Tennessee. And so now here is a situation where some of the entities that were, indisputably involved in helping to create that problem are now sending some resources our way. And it is coming down to the local level to help people here.
Yeah, it's one of those things that seems so rare that that settlements like this or what have as big an impact as this could have. I mean, $12 million is a lot of money. So,
yeah.
Nowhere close to the amount of money that the opioid crisis has cost us.
Absolutely.
But it still can do a lot of good work in the community.
Yeah, and McNabb, for example, is not only getting funding through the county, they're also, because the state has its own sort of tranche of this funding that it is distributing directly. And so McNabb is also receiving some money from the state. The city of Knoxville is also getting a portion of this, and I think we don't have the info yet on exactly how they're going to distribute it, but all of these local agencies and nonprofits can probably apply in different ways for all of those different streams. So, right, over the next number of years, we are going to see literal millions of dollars coming into all of these agencies, going to these very, practical, hands-on approaches to trying to deal with what is still a crisis and is still, we're losing hundreds of people a year are dying from overdoses in Knox County still, and the number of families impacted by this crisis in one way or another is, a number much greater than that. So we will continue to cover that, but that money is actually finally getting here. All right, let's look ahead to what's going on next week. There are a couple of meetings. County Commission on Monday will have its monthly agenda review meeting at 3 p.m. and then its zoning meeting at 5 p.m. One interesting thing on the zoning agenda is they're going to be looking at a plan that was approved that came through the Planning Commission this past month, but that requires a change to the county's newly adopted comprehensive land use plan, and the Knox County Planning Alliance is raising concerns about this. That's a coalition of local community groups and residents associations and so forth. They're raising concerns about that because when the comprehensive land use plan was adopted just back in May, part of the agreement in it written into the plan is that it is only to be amended on a quarterly basis, because under our old plans, what was happening, the old plans were so old and there were so many exemptions and exceptions that had to be granted under them that was happening sort of every month. And so the plan was kind of just being constantly rewritten every month. And people in the Planning Alliance and other people who are advocates for planning raised concerns about that. And said that, the whole point of having a plan is that it's something that you don't just kind of keep changing constantly, because then it's not really a plan. And yet already, just a few months into the new plan, we're already having a change to the plan that is not coming on that quarterly cycle. And there are reasons for it. It has to do with, this is something that had been initially asked for under the old plan, and so it should kind of be grandfathered in and so forth. But I think we're going to hear discussion there, because this is a test of, sort of how serious is the county going to be about sticking to the plan that it literally just adopted. So I think we're going to hear discussion of that at the zoning meeting. So that's Monday at 5 p.m. in the main assembly room of the City County building. And then, Scott, the next night in the same place, City Council will be in action.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that they're going to be looking at is, and we've talked about NOAA before, that's naturally occurring affordable housing, which is basically existing apartment buildings where, the rents are affordable for the most part. And the city has been looking at ways to help the owners of those properties keep their make renovations and in exchange for keeping the rents low and that sort of thing. Well, this is a similar thing is going to be considered. They've got there's an apartment complex called the Pines in just off Francis Road near Bearden Middle School, and they're renovating 152 of their units. 17 of them are affordable units. They use Section 8 vouchers and all. So they have asked the city, pending council's approval, be providing about $150,000, or I'm sorry, $510,000 for renovations to those units. They're not paying for the whole renovation, but the ones for those units. So it'll be $500,000 will go there, and they will be able to, and there's going to pledge to keep those units affordable for the next 20 years. So their affordability, that's kind of the switch there. They definitely, that's going to be written into the agreement. They have to do that. Also, you talked about the Planning Commission. There's going to be an appeal for a Planning Commission decision as well at City Council. This is kind of a weird little thing, though. That's a decision where they granted special use for townhouses, 4 townhouses to be built in North Shore Town Center, to allow them to be taller than the rules specify. They go from 35 feet to 41 feet. And some people from out there have appealed, and so City Council will determine whether those are too tall or not.
Because North Shore Town Center is actually in the city of Knoxville, even though you might not necessarily think so.
Yeah, it's right at the edge of the city. So, but yes, it is. It is, and that's kind of an interesting little development out there. I mean, it's a kind of the model for what a lot of these people have advocated for. Commercial nodes where there's mixed use and there's commercial, there's residences. It's a little more dense. Sort of, it can be a model for that. So it's an interesting little place.
All right. Well, we will be back next week to talk about those things and anything else that comes up in the interim. Thanks, as always, to Lord Seth Barber for his production work here with Barbarian Productions. Our theme music is by Will Wright, and we will talk to you next week.
Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost an Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And many thanks to William Wright for composing our theme song. Compass Points is a partnership of Barking Shark Media and Barbarian Productions, and recorded by Lord Seth A. Barber at Barbarian Studios, Knoxville, Tennessee.